Kurt Volker. I am a former U.S. ambassador to NATO and special representative for Ukraine, and a distinguished fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis.
I want to ask you off the top here about this 3-day ceasefire that Moscow is offering. And if anything strikes you as odd about offering a 3-day ceasefire that doesn't start for another 8 days now.
Exactly. No, this is a gimmick. This is Vladimir Putin, I think, trying to respond to what Trump said over the weekend. When Trump said, maybe Putin is tapping me along. Maybe he's not serious. Maybe I need to take a different approach. So Putin wanted to do something to say, oh, no, 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 we really do want a ceasefire. But of course, what Putin is offering is not a full, comprehensive, and permanent ceasefire, as Trump has asked for, and as the Ukrainians have agreed to. He's saying, no, we'll do this on May 8th and we'll stretch it out to May 10th, but it's not serious. It's a gimmick in order to try to appear that he has some humanitarian or humane sympathies at heart, when in fact it's just a delaying tactic.
And the fact that there was an attack today, another Russian attack on Ukraine, I think in the Dnipro area, seems to suggest exactly what you're saying, that that was a gimmick. And I also wonder too, Kurt, if this is this so-called ceasefire that's supposed to happen on the 80th anniversary of the Victory Day there, if they're not trying to use that as well as perhaps a way to covertly or maybe even surreptitiously suggest that they've won in Ukraine, which is something I'm sure they wanted to do all along, but just wondering what your thoughts are about that.
Well, that's a very interesting comment, JJ, because Putin wanting to suggest that he has already won is interesting, because that would indicate a sense that he's not going to have to do more in order to be able to win, that what he's done is enough. If that's true, that would be the first time we will have seen that, because everything up until now is about more, more, more. And you would have seen Foreign Minister Lavrov's comments from a couple of days ago, where he even upped the ante on what Putin had said. Putin was talking about getting all the territory of the four provinces plus Crimea that they claim to have annexed. And one of those would be recognized, Crimea, as Russian territory. The rest would be disputed, but everyone would understand that Russia occupies them. Lavrov said, no, we need recognition not only of Crimea, we need recognition of all of these four provinces as Russian territory. And that is something that they have not been able to achieve militarily, something they're hoping to achieve, in the process of negotiations, if that can be done. But to suggest it the other way around, that he's now looking to say what we've got is victory, that's interesting. There might be something to play with there, in fact, if that's true.
Yeah, it's very, very, very possible. I do think though that one of the things that may be at play here, and this is of course me thinking, I certainly don't have anywhere near the kind of understanding of this that you do, is Moscow appears to be as well trying to slow walk this so that they can continue building up their military and possibly preparing for some other conflict for later. And I'm wondering how will they be able to do this? Will they be able to do that? Because do you see Ukraine going along with this ceasefire and this essentially giving up Crimea? And can they even do that
Yeah.
legally, constitutionally?
Well, so let's take these in pieces. First off, Ukraine cannot ever agree to legitimizing Russia's occupation of Crimea or any of the rest of Ukraine. It is part of Ukraine. It is recognized internationally. It's part of the Ukrainian constitution. It was recognized by Russia after Ukraine's independence. It is a violation of every standard of international norms for Russia to take territory and have that be accepted now as Russian territory. So Ukraine can't do that. No one can do that. Um, Next piece is, could Ukraine agree to a ceasefire where it continues to be occupied by Russia, but it's disputed internationally? Well, yes, I think they could. And that is, in fact, what happened after 2014 when Russia invaded the first time and took Crimea. We had a long period of time when it was occupied, but it was not being contested militarily, and Ukraine could move on. I think that that is indeed possible. When you talk about a peace agreement, I don't think there is any scenario where Putin agrees to an independent, sovereign Ukraine. He is always putting up conditions that would take away that sovereignty and that independence. For example, Ukraine can't have a military. Ukraine can't be a member of NATO. Zelensky is not a legitimate leader. You have to have a new election and elect somebody else so that there's a new leader in Ukraine, which Putin hopes he can influence. So he is not giving up on those objectives. And then finally, from the Western point of view, or even the US point of view, if that's what Putin is doing, we shouldn't have any illusions about, how a peace agreement is going to go. A peace agreement would only happen if Putin got everything he wanted. And if we think that everything that Putin wants is unreasonable and unacceptable to the Ukrainians, the US should not be out there on a limb saying, well, Ukrainians can't accept it, Europeans can't accept it, NATO can't accept it, but we'll do it. That's not a good place for the United States. What we want to do is say, look, we want a sustainable peace. If Putin can't agree to a sustainable peace, then let's at least have a ceasefire and let's build the walls, good fences make good neighbors. Let's build the walls and say, okay, we're going to have a deterrence relationship, but the rest of us can all move on. Ukraine can move on and be a sovereign, independent state.
So, based on what you've seen from the U.S. and from General Kellogg, who I think earlier, or maybe last night or earlier, said that this whole idea of a 3-day ceasefire is absurd, and we heard the president, as you mentioned over the weekend, say they want something more, something longer.
Yeah.
So, does the U.S. exit this now and say, okay, Russia, enough, and we're going to have to sanction you because you really don't want peace? Or does the U.S. continue in this process? And do you see this actually working out, a ceasefire working out, or do you see this conflict continuing?
Well, we're in the fog of negotiations as opposed to the fog of war. And so we don't really know what people are saying to each other and where this is going. But if you get out of that fog and you get up above it and you look at it, I think the parameters of where this is going are clear. Eventually, sometime by the end of this year, I would expect you'll have a ceasefire in Ukraine. Putin cannot sustain the finances of this war beyond this fiscal year. He is running short on hard cash to pay for the military effort that he's doing, and he can't keep throwing soldiers away to waste. So I think we get a ceasefire. I think we already have a deal with Ukraine on reciprocity, which is Ukraine paying its way rather than getting aid from American taxpayers. That's how Ukraine continues to get American military support, by paying for it. I think we have an understanding with our West European allies, particularly Starmer and Macron, that they're going to provide a force for Ukraine and security assurances for Ukraine. So they make sure Putin is not tempted to attack again. That's deterrence and that's burden sharing. So I think those pieces, ceasefire, reciprocity, deterrence, and burden sharing, that's where we're going. It may take another 6 months to get there, but that's what we're going to end up with by the end of the year.
Anything else that I haven't asked you about that you want to add that you think is important on this?
Absolutely. Thank you, JJ, because if we have a ceasefire in Ukraine, a durable ceasefire, which I think is going to happen sooner or later, Putin's resisting it, but eventually I think we'll get there. The next biggest thing is to get Ukraine's economic recovery off the ground. We've had 3 years of Ukraine economic recovery conferences, Lugano, London, Berlin. They've done absolutely nothing. And there's going to be one in Rome in July. And this is actually the opportunity to make a difference where if we can put former European Prime Minister and a body in charge, like a Marshall Fund administrator, make this a European one, but say we're going to actually lean in and every day think about how we accelerate Ukraine's economic recovery. That should go hand in hand with the timing of a ceasefire so that we take advantage of the time better than Putin does by rearming.
Do you get the sense Russia's done after whatever happens in Ukraine?
Actually, no. I think that they may be forced into a ceasefire in Ukraine, and then they're going to be looking to see how they can test NATO somewhere else. And if they were to make a big invasion, Baltic states or Poland or something like that, they would expect NATO to respond. They would expect a big NATO response. But what if they did something small? And you can take a couple of real world examples. Like one of them, they've already been moving the buoys in the river between Russia and Estonia, saying that the middle line, where these buoys have always been, is actually no longer the border. It's somewhere else. So they keep taking out the buoys. Well, what if one day they said, we're going to say that actually the entire river is Russian? And there's this little piece of Narvik where there's a Russian speaking minority that wants to be part of Russia. So we're going to take that too. But that's all. We're not doing more than that. They would be doing that to test NATO and say, does NATO view this as Article 5? Is NATO going to go to World War III over this? And they'd be betting no to see how we react. Or you can take another example, which is Kaliningrad, Russian territory, is separated from Belarus and the rest of Russia by a 60-kilometer piece of land, which is the Polish-Lithuanian border. And at some point, Russia might say, you know what, it's not fair that we don't have a land corridor to connect Kaliningrad with the rest of Russia. So we're just going to take it. 5 kilometers banned. Nobody lives there. Easy to say, we just need this. And they're limited in that objective. They're doing that not only just to take the territory, but to test NATO. Does NATO treat that as Article 5? Does NATO say, okay, we are now at war with Russia because of this? And I think they're betting that we would try to avoid that. So these are the things that I think Russia would be tempted to test once they have been blocked in Ukraine.